hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist, and your host. Pique My Interest is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. From birthday parties to anniversary celebrations to graduation events, we all know that balloons identify the party. But what if an artist took these balloons and turned it into an artistic endeavor? PMI is back in Sin City to look at the incredible craft of balloon art. Meet Tawney Bubbles, the kick-ass artist who will blow you away with just about anything that comes into her head and recreates with thousands of types of colors and shapes of balloons to create a story. These range from high-end fashion pieces to state-of-the-art installations. With a background in theater, the storytelling in Tawney's sculptures and fashion is evident. As soon as she graduated, she realized she didn't want to do what she studied, and with a side gig in making simple balloon shapes for parties, her interest was piqued, and she began to experiment and play. She is fascinated with a craft that is temporary, only for a moment. There is a difficulty of speed in this craft. Balloons only have a small lifespan. You have to be able to fix it quickly if it's meant to be inflated and displayed over a long period of time. Balloons cause a challenge because you are limited with size and shapes of pieces, but that is where Tawney's artistry shines with her speciality in creating unique shapes, even into fashionable pieces. Tawney loves that balloon art has a small carbon footprint and is always trying to find ways to make her craft more eco-friendly. Tawney dives into the Vegas lifestyle and how it is an amazing place to be weird and explore your wild side. This episode was recorded on September 14th in Las Vegas, Nevada. I hope you look up their work and your interest is piqued. I hope you're having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled World Inflated. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I am currently in Las Vegas, Nevada, sitting in this beautiful studio in this home of this awesome artist. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. Have you done anything interesting lately?
I just wrapped up the Black and White Party, which is a benefit for AFAN, which is AIDS for AIDS of Southern Nevada. We don't know why the S isn't in the name, other than it was probably hard to say. But it's a benefit for people who are living with AIDS. Part of the money goes to research. Part of it goes mostly, though, to families of people who are living with it because medication is so expensive. But there were two artists, myself and Ronnie Johnson, now, that we made 6 costumes out of balloons. We had our fabulous models running around in fun balloon costumes, taking pictures with everybody, and having a great time.
Yeah, fantastic. And please introduce yourself. Who are you and where are you from?
Oh, yeah, I guess I could do that. My name is Tawney B. I am a balloon artist, and I make weird things out of balloons. I'm primarily known for making costumes and dresses, so couture and fanciness like that. I'm doing a lot of talking with my arms, even though you can't actually see me.
No, they can tell. But and you're from the Vegas area?
I am. I'm born and raised in Las Vegas.
Fantastic. And we learned about your craft. You do balloons, and you said you do fashion a little bit. What else is your specialty within balloons?
I do a lot of large-scale installations. We did a big... We covered like the wall of the MGM, not the outside wall bit, but there's a atrium area that was very, very ugly. And it was for a big fancy swanky event, so I was hired to cover the entire wall with balloons, which was very cool. So we made this big abstract sculpture that kind of covered the whole thing and was super fun. We had a whole bunch of people that worked on that with me.
And what makes your work in balloon different than others who work in balloon craft?
I think most people think of balloons and they're thinking like balloon animals, the classic dog, swords, stuff for kids' parties, which is great. I have a ton of friends who do that, totally respect it. I am making things that are on a larger scale. So, like I said, costumes that are detail-oriented, lots and lots and lots of tiny little bubbles, all made out of balloons. That is a piece that you can actually wear. And sculptures that are custom made for an event. So somebody wants a life-size elephant, I'm one of the people that you would call for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think looking through a lot of your work, you had mentioned it earlier, I think you're trailblazing through fashion. I think that is such a cool and unique part of balloons that we don't see. When I think of balloon art, I do think of the classic dog.
Of course.
Or the sword, or the classic snake. Or if you're getting elegant, you get that banner, or you might get a balloon arch somewhere. And then just looking at Tawney Bubble's work, and you start to see these beautiful dresses, and even from a distance, you might not even know it's balloons. And being able to take those tiny little air pockets with a little bit of rubber, and you turn it into a whole dress. You turn it into a whole story. So I'm very excited to get into that a little bit. But before we go there, what's your background? Do you have any education?
So I was a theater kid. I started out in performance and went to college. And I wound up switching my major partway through to stage management. So I was still in the arts of performance, but I was starting to take like a more backstage role. And as I continued, I wasn't loving it as much as I did when I started. So by the time I finished my degree, I really didn't want to do what I had just gone to school for. I learned how to make balloons when I was in high school. I was supposed to just be my little Mick job. Did not occur to me that it would become a career, but it sounded fun to, little 17-year-old Tawney, a friend of mine, her uncle owned a catering company. And he would hire high school kids to dress up in embarrassing costumes, clown costumes, Little Miss Muffet, whatever it was, that particular party. And he taught us how to make like very, very basic balloon animals. Like, here's a dog, here's a sword. And I remember when I first went in for the interview, I didn't realize I was going to be learning how to make the balloons that day. But I went in for this interview. I think maybe the second interview I had ever done. It might have even been the first. Because like I said, I'm 17. He's like, yeah, that's great, cool. Here's a bag of balloons. He taught me how to make like a dog and a sword, handed me some face paints and this really horrific off-the-rack clown costume. He's like, your first gig is on Saturday. Oh, okay. So I was very thrown into it, which turned out to be great, but it really was not meant to be a career. But like I said, I finished college and no longer wanted to do what I had just gone to school for, but I was getting really good at the balloons. I didn't want to do the costume stuff, but I liked the art and I was starting to learn more and more things, and it was providing an outlet that I liked. It was an unusual medium. I honestly really like the temporary nature of it. There's something kind of cool about a thing that you make for a moment. Like, it's got a life to it. Like, I think it's I don't know the phrase, but I mean, the thing that makes life so precious is that it ends. And I think there's something really cool about that with a temporary art form too. I think performance as well, when you're talking about like live theater, it has a lifespan to it that's very much alive because it dies. And I like that, and I liked that in the art. So I kind of made this decision that was a little bit hard because I was so... My brain up to that point, being, my early 20s, it had only wanted this one thing. It had wanted to be a performer. And I had already kind of let that go to an extent. And now, like, moving away from theater entirely to focus on something else was kind of a big mental leap. But it was like I made the decision and felt very joyful afterwards. I'm like, okay, this was the right decision. This is the feeling that I want to feel.
That basically answers my next question of what really piqued your interest about balloons. And I love your answer about the temporary storytelling of it. I think that leads very much into your theatrical background of having this story that you can tell, that you can portray, that you can transpose into balloons, and you can make somebody feel something for just that moment in time with just a very unique craft. I think that's very cool. But also going back a little bit further, what about your upbringing in Vegas turns you into a creator?
Oh, Vegas is a great place to have a weird job. I like Vegas. It's a bizarre town. A lot of people do not like it. I kind of like that it has accepted its inauthenticity, if that makes sense. Like there's a braveness, I think, to just being what you are, and if that thing is kind of a little bit trashy, like just being it with like no regrets and choosing that thing. And I think there's something about Vegas that has that.
The Wild West.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've always kind of liked the vibe of Las Vegas. It's a good place to find weird people too, which I'm attracted to. Like I like other weirdos who do weird things, and I do kind of feel like this is a good place for that.
What I've learned about Vegas, which is different than my craft, in theater, it's a very competitive. We're all trying to get the same parts. We're all going into audition trying to get this one show. And what I've learned talking with artists from Las Vegas, it is a very collaborative community. It's a tourist town, and so the only way that you can support each other is if you are supporting each other. You can cross-promote somebody else, because if they go see something else and see something over there, that in turn will go influence somebody to go see something else, or that might go to have them go to the card table. And if your dealer is promoting the latest bubble work somewhere, then you're going to go see that, and that might go have an advertisement to go see something else. So I think that has blown my mind with the Vegas community, is how supportive you are of each other.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I don't know that I had really thought about that until you brought it up, but you're right. Like I'm sure there's a little competition here and there, but for the most part, like I think this is a community that does like collaboration and does feel like cross promotion. So much of my work has come from friends promoting me and vice versa. I know this person who's looking for something weird. Oh, great. Here's my friend Tawney who can make a balloon dress for your thing. Or, I have a friend who's doing a dirty hypnosis show. You should go see that. Or Kevin Lapine, by the way. So promote my buddies.
Shout out.
But there is a lot of that. And I guess I'm kind of used to a show promoting another show that I didn't really think. I guess that is kind of a lucky thing about Vegas that we do that.
It's very different than most places in the world, and I think it's great. But now, as you said, you are being commissioned to make dresses. You are commissioned to work at the MGM to decorate the very iconic hotel, and to me, that says you're successful. Do you consider yourself successful? What is success in balloon making, and what really got you succeeding?
I'm going to be brave and say yes, I do think I'm successful. It's such a hard thing to say about yourself, but yes, I think so. Like there are always goals. Like you find a goal, you match their goal, or you meet the goal, you create a new goal because we're artists and that's what you have to do. Like that's why you get good. So there's always, okay, what's the next thing? And I think there's a little bit of a danger of that preventing you from allowing to see that, like, yes, this is, I have accomplished, like, this is success. To me, I think also, though, success is more happiness-based than financially based. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm comfortable, but, like, I've been doing this job for 25-ish years, somewhere in that ballpark, and I still genuinely love doing it.
And this is your fully self-supported artist. Yep. This is your job.
Yep. So that to me, I think, is definitely something to be proud of, is still really enjoying what you do after 25 years. Like, I want to chase different challenges inside my field, but I don't want to change my field. Like, I don't want a different thing. I want this.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate that we do have to consider success with finances every once in a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously. and don't get me wrong, I was definitely like the poor kid for a very long time, like any artist. Like, I spent a very long time, paycheck to paycheck, and I think that's almost every artist, because it's getting yourself known and some amount of luck and some amount of meeting the right people and getting yourself out into the world. It's not an easy thing to do. It is very nice to now feel comfortable and not feel like, oh my God, where is this bill going to come from? It's like, oh, it's paid. Oh, how lovely.
And I think we'll get a little bit into your journey on how you made that leap into becoming a fully self-sustained artist. But right now, I want to know about your creation process. Tell us, how do you come up with your ideas? We've talked a little bit earlier about abstract versus realistic. You've talked about being commissioned for things versus trying to come up with things on your own. Tell us about your creation process.
I don't know that I have a concrete answer for that. I think it's a little bit different every time. Sometimes that's mood-based, sometimes that's based on what I've been given. So certain events, you're going to have like, hey, we want a very, very specific, this is our logo, right? That needs to be made out of balloons. Like there was one I did for a company that the logo was a cat in a Hawaiian shirt wearing sunglasses, and it's very, very specific versus most logos that are, here's a swoosh mark or whatever it is. So it was definitely like, okay, and it had to be in a very specific size as well, which is sometimes tricky with balloons because you don't have, it's not like clay or something where you can change the size of the original mold. Yeah. Like balloons are specific, and there are several different sizes, but there is a limitation to what size you can make any given bubble. So there are certain shapes that are really complicated to make out of balloons. In fact, actually, cats are. Turns out we all hate cats. not the actual cat. The actual cat is very cute, but I did a collaborative project in New York a couple years ago, and it was this jungle-based thing, and the person who had sold it, the person who was leading the event, had sold like 3 jungle cats, and then there's elephants and giraffes and a bunch of trees and stuff like that, and a big waterfall with a rhino, and everyone, they're all like, hey, okay, I want to do this, and I'm like, I really don't want to do the cats, but I don't want to say I don't like making cats. So I'm like, okay, I'll make the cats. And it turned out every person had said, I'll do anything but the cats. And I was the only asshole that was like willing to do the cats, so I got stuck doing all 3 of the cats. I did have somebody come in and help me with some of the bodies, but well, it turns out we all hate making cats. There's something about that shape does not want to play.
Well, speaking of, I mean, how in your brain, you have a theatrical background, where are you coming up with these shapes? Every sculpture that is made is created with different forms and different smaller things. Where in your creation process are you coming up with these shapes? Where are you picking the colors?
The shape is a lot of it is play. There is a lot of technique that you can learn, but a lot of it is definitely play. There are, for weird shapes, there are things you can do like stuff a balloon inside of a balloon. It's called distortion, to get shapes that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get otherwise, because you're putting different balloons in and then it's hard to explain that in words and not, here, this is what I'm doing.
A lot of experimentation.
Right.
Figuring it out.
Right.
You can't blow a square balloon, but I'm sure you could figure out something that might resemble a square.
Right. So a lot of the technique that I usually do is called weaving. So it's very similar to like weaving a basket. So like when you're weaving a basket, you've got layer by layer by layer. And that's usually my go-to for shapes. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is because it's the thing I'm the most used to, and I'm trying to push myself to do a little more with like distortion and things like that. Trying not to be too comfortable in your own skill set.
Yeah.
So I have been trying to push into different techniques and learn, especially some of the newer things, because I have been doing this for like 25 years. The industry has come a very long way since then.
Even just to get references. Earlier, you talked about the convenience of a search engine. Google, you can just type in, there's the cat, I know the nose needs to look like this, I can use my techniques to kind of make it look like that, and there it is. But, as you said, maybe when you started, that wasn't there. You didn't have that capability.
Right, and especially when I started, I was doing kids' parties, and kids are ruthless. They are That's actually, okay, so I'm going to back up and tell a quick story. Because it was like one of the first things that really like pushed me forward was at the time, I only knew how to make like a dog and a sword, like a very, very basic things. And I was doing a gig with another clown at the time, and he was making like a monkey and a palm tree, and they're all actually very standard balloons now that I know of, but at the time I hadn't seen them. And I had this, line of kids, and he had his line of kids off on the other side of this big giant park, and the kids would see what was coming out of his line and expect me to be able to do the same thing, and I cannot. And a 5-year-old is not afraid to tell you you suck.
Ruthless.
And I literally went to the library right after that gig and checked out every book I could find on balloon animals. And I spent like the next 3 days locked in my room. So also remember, I'm 17. So having this line full of children tell you you're terrible for, 5 hours is very damaging to the 17-year-old brain. So I just sat there and like, oh, monkey in the tree, I got this, you little bitch.
I'll show you.
But that was actually the first, like, oh, okay, I'm going to make a leap forward.
Yeah. So you had that drive.
Yeah.
That 5-year-old to push you.
Thank God for the little 5-year-old shits.
And just curious, do you use helium or do you use air?
I almost exclusively use air.
Mm-hmm.
I will occasionally use helium. I don't like helium. It's so first of all, it's in short supply right now. It's actually going extinct. There's some talk of it's a mining process that you mine for helium. There's some talk about mining for more. Basically, it was all mined, if I remember this correctly, it was all mined like a long time ago, and then they decided that we're not going to mine for this anymore. And I'm not actually sure what the reasoning is for that. From my understanding, it's just some bizarre rule that it's not like an environmental impact or anything like that. Which, once again, don't quote me on this. I might be incorrect. But for some reason, they stopped mining for it. And they're talking about potentially opening that up because it does have use in the medical industry. Not a ton, but it is used. It is used in the medical industry. So that's why they are. But it's become very expensive to use. There are some very cool things you can do with helium, but it's a pain lugging. Honestly, I'm lazy and it's a pain to like lug this tank around and having to get it filled all the time, et cetera, et cetera. So I just never liked using it from the brattier element. But I also think that it forced a little bit of creativity when people weren't allowed to use helium. Mm-hmm. And stuff that can be put on a framework, I find frequently looks cooler and you can do more with and encourages a little more creativity than just, here's a bundle of balloons to use as a centerpiece on a table.
Yeah, forced creativity is not always the easiest, but sometimes you can get some really cool stuff out of it.
Right. And I've actually found, personally, sometimes forced creativity works well for me.
Well, every artist is different.
Right, right. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, because you don't want, like, sometimes when it's a commissioned thing, that can screw with your brain a little bit.
Right. Oh my gosh, yeah. When somebody needs to request something specific, then you start second guessing everything. Absolutely.
But when it's like, hey, there was a big balloon shortage kind of right after quarantine, because the factories had to be, they were down to like half capacity and stuff like that. So coming out, and everybody who has just been locked in their houses for the last 2 years is now having a party. So the event industry had a massive boom that first year after COVID, and there was a really big balloon shortage, which is super fun. And trying to find colors was really, really difficult. So everybody was kind of pushed into forced creativity of how are you going to achieve this look, or how are you going to get this color? And I think a lot of cool stuff actually kind of came out of that. It also opened up the industry to, at the time, there had really only been a couple of manufacturers making the majority of the balloons that we use. And because they couldn't keep up with supply, other companies were allowed, that had kind of been pushed to the side for a long time, had an opening to bring in new colors and new supplies. And I think a lot of smaller companies that wouldn't have had a chance prior to this got a chance, and some of them are making some really cool products, or at least like some like very cool colors that we didn't have before.
Very cool. I really like that. Going back to kind of mining the earth a little bit and talking about the waste of balloons, something you brought up when we were getting coffee earlier that I never really realized is that a lot of the times artists, when they do events, will have truckloads of garbage afterwards.
Yeah, so a lot of the events that I do, like I see, because it's usually not just balloons. There's also somebody who is doing something with like foam core, which is a way of making, you can cover all sorts of things and make things look very cool, and it is a neat thing, don't get me wrong, but the waste afterwards, especially because foam core is partially plastic, is just truckloads and truckloads of garbage after an event. And with balloons, you're talking about like a garbage bag. Even for one of these massive, giant pieces that we build, it's rare that you're ever going to go past like 2 garbage bags to have filled an entire room. So when you are talking about special events where this isn't something that you're going to be able to use again, because it is a logo or something like that. But all of these banners and stuff that are printed out for events, all of that just goes into the garbage, and all of it takes up an enormous amount of space. And the balloons, because it's air filled for a temporary art form, its impact is much smaller, or its footprint, I guess, is much smaller physically at the end of the day.
Yeah, and something else I never realized with balloon sculpting is that the speed that you have to do it. And you can't start a month ahead of time. If you're commissioned to do a sculpture for something, you can plan it, but you can't really start it until maybe a day or 2 beforehand.
Yeah, depending on what it is. So it does depend on what it is. Like, you have a little more time with that when you're doing like these larger installations. When you're talking about the dresses, which have very, very, very tiny little bubbles, those deflate so fast that when I'm doing those, it is typically like the day before, maybe the day before that is pretty much your time frame to make them, because they're going to deflate, and all of a sudden this thing that was made for a grown-up now fits a child. So it's kind of like what I was saying at coffee, is that like it's nothing to have a 13-hour build where you just are going straight the night before, and you go all night, you do the event, and then you go home and you crash for a couple of days. Some of the larger scale events, though, where we're using primarily rounds to build those, and we can use larger sizes to make the bubbles, essentially. That you can fill with, there's a product called High Float that you can put inside the balloon, and that will make the balloon last for actually a very long time. So there are some installations that have been up for as much as 2 months. You need to do some repair in between that, but it does make a longer term installation possible. Yeah. So without High Float, we did, this was one of the first big builds. It was the first for me, but it was still sort of early on in the process of making these big giant builds as a community, as opposed to, a couple of people. We built a haunted house, and it was this 10-room haunted house that you could like walk through, and we had all sorts of monsters made out of balloons, and there was somebody had made Grimmy, which is the Grim Reaper. And he was this very cute Grimmy, and he was teasing the kids, and it was very cute and playful, and it was a very fun walk through haunted house. That I think we kept open for 2 weeks. I don't remember. High Float might have been a thing at the time, but it wasn't. If it was, it wasn't something that we were using yet. So they do on their own have a pretty decent lifespan if the bubbles are big enough. Once again, no matter what, you're going to have some level, some amount of artists that are in there repairing
I'm sure,
some of the smaller
especially
things.
In like a haunted house, things might pop, things might deflate.
Right.
Is it simple enough to just go in and replace things?
Yeah, usually if you lose like one bubble, even if it is on the same balloon, the balloons kind of, when you're twisting them, they kind of start to seal themselves together after a little while. So usually you're not losing a big chain of things. You're just losing like a small piece that you can go in and repair. What about in
your weave technique? If there's a balloon that goes off, is it easy to weave in a new balloon?
Sort of. So that's kind of what I'm saying, where the balloons sort of seal themselves off a little bit, is that you don't have to repair that entire balloon most of the time. Which is not to say that doesn't happen, and it's a giant pain when it does, but it's not, it's not like you have to start over.
Right. And what gets your creative juices flowing? What inspires you?
I think for me, when I'm at my best is when I've been given a loose theme and creative freedom. And because that answer is going to be a little bit different for everybody,
for sure.
Right?
Especially commission-based.
Right. But even if it's not commission-based, I think I sort of like having a prompt.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to be a slave to that prompt. But if it's so one of the events that I do is this, we're talking about a coffee, is Circus Couture, which is this big show that is half fashion show, half circus performers. A lot of circus performers are in it, designers, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been a part of that for quite a few years. They give everybody a theme, and the themes are frequently pretty abstract. So I think my favorite was Unlocked. And then they pretty much just let you roll with whatever that means to you. So I made, having just said I don't use helium, I made, the dress that I made was this kind of Marie Antoinette. I'm using my hands to describe the shape of this for a podcast. But I think like a big wide skirt that kind of goes straight out, that kind of Rococo design. But it was designed to open, to like be unlocked. So she came out to the end of the runway, and there were 2 dancers with her, and the 2 of them like took the bottom part of the skirt off, and helium balloons like flew up in the skirt and flew into the air, and it turned out to be a very cool effect. So yeah, so that was fun. And that's kind of the coolest thing about, I think, that particular project, is that it's so collaborative. So you have so many dancers that are involved, and so many artists that are involved. So like, your model is coming out, and there's a whole choreographed dance going on behind her, and it's very theatrical and fun. I'm like, give me all of the things with all of the artists. I love this.
It's brilliant. I love adding a little bit of performance art to that as well.
Yeah.
But as an artist, we all run into a creative block. We don't always have these ideas coming. How do you overcome a creative block? Going hand in hand, do you have any hobbies? Do you like to listen to music in your studio? Here, there's a lot of musical instruments. Do you have to play music?
So when he's looking around, as my husband type person has a recording studio, so we're surrounded by like a drum kit and keyboards and microphones and many things. But yes, I do like to listen to music. Overcoming that block is such a hard thing to do. I think maybe that's a little bit of like the forced creativity is somebody hitting you over the hammer and saying, look, you have a timeline. This is what you're making. And I think there is kind of an advantage to commissioned pieces in that regard of like, commission can be the death of art, but also sometimes it can be the kick in the pants you need if you're just not in the right headspace. I think, and I know a lot of artists experience the same thing. If you were stuck during quarantine, there's only so much I can do inside, a house. Which is not to say I can't, and I should have, like a lot of us, I should have taken more advantage of the time than I did. And I learned some other things. Like I learned how to do like digital illustration, which had been a thing that I had wanted to do. I'm tangenting again, but it was definitely hard to go back to balloons though immediately after that, because it had been kind of like, okay, I'm learning this other thing and I'm learning this other thing, and feeling very, very stuck in my own art form that I had always really loved. And it was a little bit, there was a photographer, Richard Faberty, that I work with pretty frequently, who's amazing, and I love him. He's one of my favorite human beings. And he had just been recently working with a model who is this stunning, burlesque, beautiful singer, Melanie Sweets. She's in, actually, Absinthe as one of the singers. She had wanted, somehow the two of them got talking and they wanted to do a thing with the balloons. So he called me up like, hey, do you have time? Come do this thing. And I'm like, okay, I should do this thing. I haven't really been doing anything artistic because I kind of coming out, there was a lot of like generic work. Here's the artistic portion of your career, but also here's the like, okay, you just need to go do this arch or something because you also have to pay the bills. I had been doing a lot more of that. And I remember trying to start making this dress and not wanting to. And it just feeling like a sluggish and like, I don't know where to start. I don't have any kind of prompt. It's just blah. But I had put myself into the situation where I'd committed to this thing. So I'm like, well, we're just going to start. And I got a little way through and it was just back. Like, just like that. It's just, oh, I'm good to go again. And it wound up being one of my favorite pieces that I've made. And the photos that we got from it are spectacular and they're so pretty.
Isn't that how it always goes?
I know. And I'm like, okay, I'm good to go again.
Yeah, a little refresh.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Speaking of going a little further, what would be your advice for someone trying to get started or educated in balloon art?
In all honesty, it's a lot easier these days than it was when I first got started, because now you have resources like YouTube, and there are so many tutorials that you can purchase from. A friend of mine has a company called balloonacademy.com, and there's a ton of videos that you can stream from them that are people from literally instructors, the best of the best, selling tutorials that you just have access to that, 25 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. Mm-hmm. Your best bet, this is a pretty like open community. So if this is a thing that like anybody is interested in, what I would recommend is go to Instagram or whatever social media of your choice, type in balloon artist and your city. A lot of cities have, we call them balloon jams, but it's a bunch of people will like, the local artists will get together and like just play. And it's a great way of like inspiring creativity, but This is such an open, inviting community in most places. Like, there are some exceptions.
The competitive balloon communities,
right,
where are they?
Right. I know, this would be great for the TV show. There's more drama, and there's really kind of not. But it really is a very open and sharing community, which also I think is one of the best things about this particular field.
Yeah, I think it's a unique craft in the sense that it's pretty accessible. I'm sure you could just go to any old craft store and pick up some balloons.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, to be honest. I would go to, if you want to pick up balloons, I think the best place to get them without being like a wholesaler is probably bargain balloons.
Okay.
But I mean, type in balloons, you'll find something. The ones that are sold at like Walmart and craft stores are, so first of all, they're not good products. Also, like a good balloon is biodegradable. I only just recently learned this. I haven't had a chance to like really look into the accuracy, but it sounds like the cheaper ones might have plastic fillers in them, which is probably why they're so crappy.
Yeah.
But they're hard to, like, you start twisting, they just fall apart.
Gotcha.
So I don't necessarily recommend getting those. It is better to have a better, right, it is better to have a good product. There's a list of Sempertex are my personal favorite. There's also Decomex is a good one. There's a bunch of other companies that are coming in if anybody wants to, but shoot me an email or shoot me a message on Instagram or whatever, and I will point you in the right direction. if somebody actually like wants to learn this, I can definitely point people in the correct direction to get a good product.
Yeah.
And your best options for pricing.
Yeah. I think it's cool because anybody can learn how to make a dog. Anybody can do it to the extent of you've traveled across the world.
I have, which is so weird, but great.
I think that's cool. I mean, I'm not a balloon artist, but that would be my advice for somebody, is that this can really take you across the world.
Yeah. I've gotten to go some really, really cool places. So we were talking about like Belgium, which was where the first balloon fashion show was held. I was a part of that, and I've been to Japan a couple of times, China a couple of times. My favorite place actually was Egypt, and I was there for 10 days. I was building dresses live, so they had me on this like pedestal. That was the craziest freaking event. I was met at the airport, but I was treated like a princess the entire time. But I was met at the airport by two people whose job was to get me through customs, and then another two gentlemen picked me up from the airport to take me back to the resort that I was staying in. And then I had an entire security detail that's realistically just for show. But so the entire like week and a half, I'm surrounded by these like gorgeous, very well-built men who insist on carrying all of my things for me.
No wonder you liked it.
I'm like, oh my goodness, this is more of this, please.
More balloons. Fantastic. And then, I'm not sure if you've gotten much criticism in your day, but how do you handle it? Has anybody ever gone, that's not fashion, that's balloons?
Yeah, I mean, there are some assholes in the world. So, I mean, the worst, it's happened 2 times. And I think kind of post Me Too, it's not as prevalent. But there were 2 different events where somebody like popped one of the balloons on someone's dress with a cigarette. Because they were drunk and thought it was funny.
Of course.
And they got us very, very stern talking to. So you do, I would say that I probably run into that more than criticism of the actual art. And that might, I mean, in all honesty, it's just that I probably am not on a large enough scale to have gotten, somebody who is TikTok famous is going to get a lot more criticism than...
I always ask that question to my artists, and to be honest, I don't see anything to criticize about your work. I find it stunning, it's beautiful, it's just in your face. beautiful dresses, beautiful sculpture work.
Thank you.
Again, I just had to ask. To see if you
Oh no, I mean, I think that's a very relevant question. It's not like I've never gotten. I would say most of the criticism I've got though has been upon request. Like, how can we make this better? Yeah. Which is very different than unsolicited criticism, which can be a lot more brutal, and I just try to.
Well, it's time to clear the air. Are there any misconceptions about your craft?
The biggest one would be currently is the environmental impact of balloons. And most of that comes from balloon releases, where you're releasing a whole bunch of balloons into the air, which don't do. Just don't do that. Don't. Like, shocking, but don't do that. It's one of the other reasons I don't love working with helium is balloons. I mean, if I am working with it, I'm very cautious about making sure everything is tied to something, but it does create a massive problem, and it is why you have, turtles eating balloons, and because of a balloon release, because that's how they land in the ocean. For the most part, I mean, as long as you're, proper garbage disposal of everything in general, you're not going to have that specific issue. Also, that balloons are made out of plastic, which they're not. That is incorrect information. Like I said, I'm a little unclear, but I think some of the cheaper brands that you are getting from like Walmart might have a plastic filler in them. But that's not what you're getting from the high quality balloons, which are obviously more expensive. Like, that is the biggest expense I think obviously supplies, but I only get very high quality balloons for that reason. But it is rubber, they are biodegradable. It comes from a tree that you don't have to kill the tree because it's essentially a sap. I don't know the process entirely, but the tree doesn't get damaged. It naturally produces the sap. The sap is, I don't think mined is quite the right word, but harvested. And that's what goes into making the balloons. So you're not, like paper, you have to kill the tree for paper. You don't have to with latex.
Right. Don't release balloons.
But don't release balloons. Just don't.
To all my peekers out there, if you're interested in one of the most wild, crazy events in the history of mankind, look up Balloon Fest 86. It's one of the most insane events in history. They tried to break a record for releasing the most amount of balloons.
It was so many.
In turn, air traffic control had to stop flights across the country because of the balloons. They were all landing in Canada, and it was just a problem. Oh,
they were all landing in the water supply, and for the most, so hypothetically, with balloons, what's supposed to happen is they go into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere, like, destroys them. But not everyone is going to make it into the atmosphere. So, if you're releasing 100,000 balloons, which I think was somewhere in that ballpark, it was an insane amount of balloons.
Too many.
It was absolutely insane. And it was admittedly fun watching them all go up in the air on this video, but it's like, yeah, this is obviously going to go horribly wrong. Which it did, so just don't do that.
It was the 80s.
Hey, guess what? Whatever. Problem solved.
So, don't release balloons. Another misconception that I had that I was just curious about was all the squeaking and the but you said noise-canceling headphones solves that.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. And going further, what's next for the world of balloon? Are we going to start to see new technology to be able to produce more balloons? Are we going to start to see different shapes, new colors?
I think currently colors is where we're at. We're certainly seeing different shapes. There's a company that was making really cool shapes that just went bankrupt, which is like the largest distributor of balloons just went bankrupt. So it's like this big thing, but other companies are kind of coming in. But we did lose some cool shapes that they had patents on that we're probably not going to get back.
Fortunate.
I know. So, but forced creativity.
For it is.
So we'll see like what other things. I think where we're at currently is figuring out large installations that are open to the public. Gotcha. At the current moment, for the most part, everything is commission pieces that are, corporations or whatever who is buying the art. What we're kind of as a community striving for now is figuring out the feasibility of making it open to the public so that people who aren't billionaires can come see these,
They're balloons, gosh darn it.
Right. We're proud of our things. We want, the fun, cool people to come be able to, we want other people to have access to the coolest stuff that we're doing. So that's kind of, I think you're going to start seeing that. We're just trying to figure out the feasibility of, because we're using the highest quality balloons and it becomes very expensive. The actual cost, even if everybody is donating labor, right, you just have the actual cost of the balloons. And when you're talking about something at that scale, somehow that needs to be paid for.
And what's next for you personally? Are we going to start to see some more abstraction? You started to say that you liked the abstract part. Are we going to start to see more fashion?
I'm leaning toward, both. I think I'm currently leaning towards more abstract fashion and costume. Okay. I think that's where my head is going. The event that I was telling you about, the theme was frog, but they wanted kind of a more abstract feel to it. And it was supposed to be a costume. This was a very, big client. It was a high-profile client. So it was a big deal. And this is a client who is very artistic themselves. It's the kind of person you want to be in front of. And I was working on making this costume, and I think it's the most I have struggled to make something in a very, very long time. It was not going well. It was going very, very poorly. And I'm getting closer and closer to the point that's I can't start. I'm way past the point that I could start over. I have 2 hours left before I have to get this thing into a van and take it to the event. And I remember getting to this headspace of I am about ready to call my client and tell them that I have just died in a car crash. This is embarrassingly bad. This is not what I wanted it to look like. And for the most part, you're your own worst critic. I'm also aware that okay, for the most part, I am skilled enough at this point that I might not like it, but they're going to like it. They were not going to like this. It was really just genuinely bad and creepy looking and not good at all. But I figured out, like I said, it was this sort of abstract frog design, and I finally got the eyeballs on it right, and it was the rest of it just went into place. And I think that actually is the thing that I think that piece is the piece I'm the most proud of. I'm really, really happy with the end results. And I remember, because it was a 5-hour event, so we had several people who were going to be wearing it, and I put it on the first person to try it on, and the whole thing, because it has arms, almost like a puppet, so you could move the arms inside the costume, and it just came to life. And I'm
there it is!
There it is! That's it! And I want more of that! I want to do more of that! So I think that's kind of the direction I'm pushing myself in now, is more abstract costumes, which is not to say that I want to leave the fashion portion of it. Sure. I do still like making the elegant, pretty dresses out of balloons, because there's just something absurd about an elegant balloon dress. But I'm digging. My brain is digging that right now. It wants that, and it's kind of it's a newish place for me to go.
And where can we see your work?
I do have a website. You can the website, the social media, all of the things are under World Inflated. So the website is worldinflated.com. All the social media is World Inflated, and then world like the planet, and inflated like a balloon. So you can see all of my work there. But I don't think I have anything open to the public currently on the books. I don't.
Okay. We'll be on the lookout for some of Tawney's stuff.
I'll let you know via the Instagrams or whatever social media, the TikToks, learning the TikToks.
I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Of course. And I do like to end with one last question.
Ooh.
If you could excel at any craft other than your own, what would you want to do?
Writing.
Ooh, what kind of writing? Novels?
Yeah, like a
Poetry?
novel. No, fiction. Some sort of a fiction. It's been a little bit in my brain of a new challenge because it's very, very removed from my current art form or any other art form that I've explored is words. So I think that would be you could tell what a great novelist I would be. I like words.
Well, again, thank you. I can't thank you enough, and thank you to all my peekers out there. Please let me know if you know of any special or unique artists or art forms you think I should explore. I am currently in Las Vegas, Nevada, and can't wait to see where Pique My Interest takes me next. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourself. Be kind to each other. I'm Scoob Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.